Yeah, Ritika is asking about book value. I'll explain. Anything else? Can somebody explain book value? Who will do that? Listen to the video that has been posted. Yes, who will do that? What is book value? And what is its relevance? Relevance, okay, for the time being you forget. Maybe that we will continue to learn throughout the curriculum of this course. Yes. Pragya?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, you tell.
Sir, it is basically the shareholders' fund. It includes the paid up share capital and the reserves and surplus.
If you take it as total, uh,
Yes, sir.
but we generally we also use this term as book value per share.
Per share. Yes, sir.
Right. So to do that, you will divide it by the number of paid up shares.
Yes, sir.
Right. So Ritika, is that does that clarify? You look at the balance sheet, you will find in the balance sheet all this information is there. Paid up capital of the company, reserve reserves and surplus, and also somewhere I think there must be, the timing I'm forgetting where this information would be, but there it's this information would also be there. Or if this information is not there, it can be calculated. That is about the number of shareholders. How will you do that? No, sorry, not number of shareholders, number of shares. How will you do that? Sorbi, if you know the paid up capital, how will you find out the number of shares? Shubham, Ayushi, Ayush, Ayushi is not there. Ayush,
Sir, if we
yeah,
divide the total amount paid up, the total share capital paid up by um, the the value of the share, so we will get the number of
which value?
shareholders.
So if we divide the paid up capital with the face value of the share, then we will
Face
get
value
a
of the shares, right?
Yes, sir.
total
Face
So,
amount
value.
of
so
outstanding
we will
shares.
get the number of shares, and this face value of the shares is different for different companies, which is like the denomination of a share. So this denomination, like if you look at the Indian stock market, you will find that it is 1 rupee, 2 rupee, 5 rupee, 10 rupee, and in some of the rare cases, it is 100 rupees also. Right now, I'm forgetting the name of the company, but yes, I've seen in one or two cases it is even 100 rupees also. So, assuming your paid up capital is 40 crore rupees and face value is 5 rupees, right? If the paid up capital is 40 crore rupees and face value of the share is 5 rupees, so you'll divide by this, you'll divide this 40 crore rupees by 5, so you get 8 crore as number of shares. Now, number of shareholders we still don't know, uh, but this information also helps in understanding, uh, some additional aspect of a company. If you know the sharehold number of shareholders, that also helps in understanding some additional aspect. What is it that we can learn if you happen to know the number of shareholders? How is it a valuable information? See, we use a concept called closely held companies and widely held companies. So where the number of shareholders increases and increases sufficiently, so we say it is a widely held company. And therefore, like you find in case of a widely held company, the individual shareholders would generally be holding a very minuscule percentage of the capital. And since they are holding a very minuscule percentage of the capital, the controlling stake of the promoters need not be very high to control the company. They can control the company with even less percentage of shares with them. You may find this case in many companies where the control of the control of the promoters is strong, in spite of the fact that the promoter shareholding is also not 50% or above. Right? So in that sense, we have this concept of widely held companies and closely held companies. In case of a closely held companies, you will generally find that the promoters have to keep a much higher percentage of shares with them to control the company. Okay, let's come to the subject as we were dealing. Let me just before I begin, let me look at is there anything. Yeah, okay, there is nothing on the chat box. So that's how we have been discussing. Let me also open my camera. Okay, so if you recall that this is how has been the track of our discussion in the last few classes, that we started talking about the main objective of financial management. And before I go on to the next point, why we are interested in defining our main objective, because of the two important aspects. One, this main objective of the financial management should be in tandem with the main objective of a business organization. After all, the function of financial management is subservient to the overall business objective, and therefore it has to be. So, depending upon the objective that the main business has, and we generally say, well, primary objective of a business is profit motive. But besides profit motive, there could be some other objectives depending upon who are the promoters and what are their objectives of running a business. So you may say growth, market share, doing something special. So there could be, so depending upon, so if you say doing something special, so that means the kind of activities that the promoters want to engage in. So that's how you bring other objectives of the business into it. And this main objective of the financial management, which ensures that that it is optimizing the activities in the finance function, as well as it is in tandem with the main objective of business. So there we started with the debate on profit and wealth maximization as two competing objectives, and we find that over the years, because of the reflection of the value in the markets which are efficient, in the securities markets which are efficient, we find that wealth maximization has turned out to be a superior objective, and therefore we have started as a guiding objective, we have started following wealth maximization instead of following profit maximization. But then there was a time when either securities market did not exist, or securities markets existed which were not very efficient, uh, and therefore we started hypothesizing a theoretical securities market where we take the assumption of efficient market hypothesis. In fact, in many of the advanced security markets, which could be maybe London Stock Exchange or New York Stock Exchange, or maybe some other stock exchanges in the world, where the market is operating in a very, very efficient manner. And so when we say very, very efficient manner, there are quite a few dimensions that you take into account. and these dimensions may relate to the liquidity in the market. So liquidity in the market would mean that anytime you're looking for encashing your investment because of, as an investor, because of the need, you can do it. So there are sufficient buyers available for the securities in which you are having your investment, and likewise there are sufficient sellers. So if somebody is interested in making investment and has liquid resources, could put in their money uh, at the price which is available in the market. So sufficient number of buyers and sellers brings liquidity in the securities trade, and this liquidity is a very, very important efficiency dimension. Then we moved on to three conflicting goals of finance, and we say anything that we do in finance, these are the three important goals which we are chasing. We are ensuring all these three dimensions of profitability, liquidity, and solvency simultaneously. But because we are chasing this simultaneously, we must also be wary of the fact that these three are also conflicting with each other in some sense. So, because these are conflicting with each other, the expertise of the finance manager at whatever level the finance manager is operating, with whatever domain of the finance function the finance manager is handling, the three dimensions are to be balanced. Because if these are not balanced, you will find that there is some problem. Okay, too much of solvency or too much of liquidity or too much of profitability would have, a negative impact on the other two. And then we talked about, anybody who has anything to say, ask at this stage. Okay, you feel free to interrupt me. You feel free to put your question in the chat box. So if you have anything to say up to this stage, any question, anybody has any observation to make? Okay, so I am continuing, but you feel free to interrupt me because I have put my screen with the PowerPoint presentation on. So I am immediately not able to see who has put it something on chat box, but in between I will look at it. Better would be that you interrupt me. You interrupt me to ask.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, yes, Pragya.
Sir, I was saying okay, sir.
Yeah. I understood that. But if you have anything or anybody else has at this moment to say anything, to ask anything, you're welcome. So we moved on, started looking at a very important dimension of the finance function, or even for the business, you can say, and that is about the risk that you take and the returns that you get. And it is in this context, in my one of the earlier classes, I have made a very, very important observation. So this important observation, can somebody repeat that? I was just trying to clarify what is the idea of this risk return trade off, in what manner we should understand it.
So if the company has higher risk, then the profitability would be higher.
Yes, anybody else who would like to say something on this? Who
So
can
there is a
qualify?
probability of higher returns. If
Yes.
the risk is higher, then there is a probability of getting higher returns, but there is no any surety that you will get the higher returns.
And this probability can be moving from 0% to 100%, right? The moment you say it is 100%, you say, well, it is a certainty. And the moment you say 0%, that means there is no probability. So leaving these two dimensions of 0 and 100, we are actually operating between 0 and 100 in terms of probability. So what is the role that a finance manager is playing in this? The role that finance manager is playing or business is playing in this while taking risk is also ensuring that this probability increases. So when you say the probability increases, you say your expected return is higher. Okay. Assuming I take an example, a simple example, which I can orally state. Supposing you say that you take risk in some venture and you say, well, 50% chances that profit would be 80% and 50% chances, sorry, I said 80%, let's say 8%. 50% chance is that profit would be 8% and 50% chances that the profit would be 10%. So we take a weighted average and we say, well, expected return would be 9%. So we have added the weights of the probability to the returns. So when we add weights of the probability to returns, you get the expected return. So this expected return is incorporating the dimension of probability into the profitability. And so your role lies in increasing the expected return. Otherwise, taking a risk which is very, very high, virtually getting into the domain of speculation, you do have a probability of a very, very high risk, but that probability may be minuscule. So if this probability is minuscule, taking a different example, supposing you take a risk where there is a probability of 1% of getting 30% return, and there is a probability of 99% getting 5% return. Okay, I am saying 1% probability of getting 30% return, 30, and 99% probability of getting 5% return, or maybe you say, well, 99% probability that you may actually incur loss, and so your loss may be to the tune of 5%. So if you take a weighted average of these two probabilities, where 99% is minus 5% and 1% is 30%, you will find your expected profitability would be in the negative. You will actually be incurring a loss. So this is how we incorporate the dimension of expected profitability, and this is what it shows in terms of this is a diagram that I am showing of the financial investments which could possibly be there in any of the financial assets in the market anywhere. And if you look at this diagram, it is showing the degree of risk involved and the expected return. So if you look at the one side of the spectrum, which is one side of the spectrum, which is US Treasury bills, which we virtually treated as risk-free. Why do we treat US Treasury bills as risk-free? In fact, many of the times we say even Government of India securities are risk-free, but which is not 100% correct, because in this globalized market, we say if you have the most stable economy in the world, so we start with America. So, and also we find that, well, dollar is the currency which is also used for global transactions, and therefore dollar is a currency which is coming from American economy. So you look at the American economy as the most stable economy, and therefore the security issued by US government, which is what we describe as US Treasury bills, is treated to be zero risk security. For the other securities of other countries, somewhere some minuscule risk is attached, and that risk has got to do with the probability of default. So because of this probability of default, I am not saying that this US Treasury bill will remain for decades to come, or it was there even a century before. I am not saying that. If you go back a century before, maybe the conditions was different, and maybe some other treasury bill was acting as a risk-free security. So this is how we start with the zero risk investment. From the zero risk investment, as we move on to prime grade commercial paper, government bonds. So these prime grade commercial papers are again short term in nature, issued by government. Then we have long term government bonds. Then we have investment grade corporate bonds, which companies issue. We move on to medium grade corporate bonds. So you will find, the role of rating agencies come, and these rating agencies start rating. Somewhere I have put in a slide, not immediately here, but somewhere I have put in a slide showing, how rating agencies are rating different kinds of bonds which are issued in the market. Moving on to equity stocks, and then to speculative common stocks. Coming back to the slide that we were discussing. So that's how this risk return trade off is to be understood, that higher the risk, there is a probability that we may have higher return, and the role of the finance manager, role of the business is to increase, to make efforts to increase this probability so that your expected returns are higher. Whenever you are making investments, whenever you are into business, you are into the zone of risk taking. Because you are in the zone of risk taking, you cannot say with certainty that what is the return which you may get. You can only say it in probabilistic terms. And then there is a dimension of time value of money, which we have not dealt so far, and we will be dealing in the future classes. So I started talking about the decisions involved in finance. So these decisions which are involved in finance functions, if we have to put it in a layman language, we may say that it is primarily involving two important dimensions. And these two dimensions are utilization of money and mobilization of money. Because whenever you are getting into any activity which is in the real domain, which is in the domain of real economy. So let's say you're running an airline. So to run an airline, you need various resources. So to get these resources, you need finance to do that job, and therefore you need to mobilize the finance. Once you mobilize the finance, then you can utilize it. Now, this question of mobilization and utilization, which one comes first? So we always feel that it is the mobilization which should come first before utilization comes first. But in the planning, when you're planning about the activities, maybe you start looking at the utilization first. You start looking at the investment opportunities first. You start looking at the projects which may be available in the business environment, and the projects that you have the capacity, you as a business have the capacity to undertake. So of the projects that you have the capacity to undertake, among the projects which are available in the business environment, right? So this is like an environmental scanning process, and matching these through this process, and listing the projects which you could possibly undertake. So the moment you say the projects that you could undertake, you are actually measuring your present and future capacity to handle the job of handling that particular or those particular projects. And then you start looking at, okay, of these various projects, which could possibly, so you in a way you in a way are doing a ranking exercise. So when you are ranking these, how would you rank these projects? So you start ranking these projects in terms of the returns. So which project is giving you better returns? So if you are ranking these projects, and that's where this risk return trade-off that we talked of becomes very important, because in each of the projects that you may undertake, risk is involved, and in each of the projects that you undertake, there is some expected return. So you start calculating those, and that's a very important capacity building that we will be having in this curriculum, as to how do you evaluate a project. So you are evaluating a project means, if you utilize your funds by putting your investment in that project, what is the expected return that you are going to get? And so when you are ranking various projects, So let us say, as an example, you got two projects before you. Of these two projects that you have before you, let's say one project is expectedly giving 16% return, and the other project is giving, let us say, 13% return. So of these two projects, now the question before you is, should you take up both the projects, or should you take up only one of the two projects? So if you say, well, we are not in a position to mobilize the money involved, I'm saying hypothetically, let's say each of the two projects involve 1,000 crore rupees of investment. So that means if you undertake both the projects, your investment would become 2,000 crore rupees. But if you undertake only one project, your investment would become 1,000 crore rupees. So you are, start looking at, so you are still at the planning stage, and you're trying to look at as to how much you can mobilize. So this utilization, mobilization at the planning stage go hand in hand, because unless you are able to plan your utilization, and unless you are able to visualize and plan as to how much you can mobilize, the actual execution of mobilization and utilization would not begin, right? And if it begins without this planning, then you may find that you may be putting your investment into projects which may not be as profitable as you might be desiring. Okay, so that's how this utilization and mobilization, first at the planning stage and then at the execution stage, go hand in hand. But in terms of curriculum, if you look at, we will be first talking about the utilization function, and then we move on to mobilization function. So when we are talking of this utilization function, we are saying major decision involved is investment. So this investment is nothing but investment in a project. So in a way, the resources that you might have mobilized, you are putting into profitable projects, profitable business projects. Our focus is on business, and we are discussing this subject of financial management in the context of business. Because if you discuss the function of financial management in a different context, you discuss it in the context of a let us say non-profit organizations, the fundamental change that would happen is that the main objective would change. The main objective of the organization changes, and the main objective of, in a way, financial management might also change. So if this main objective changes, because you may find that you may not have a market based evaluation criteria feasible, to look at it in terms of wealth, and so you tend to look at other objects, and therefore I'm just confining the subject, because that's how the curriculum is organized, that we are focusing on business, and it is in the context of business that we are talking of these major decisions. And so there are three major decisions that we would be talking of: investment, financing, and dividend. And then we move on to some other decisions which we describe as short-term decisions, which we describe as working capital management decisions. So of these major decisions are long-term decisions. Now one may say, well, dividend is a decision you take every year, while investment and financing decision is something you may be taking for a much longer time frame. If you are putting up a steel plant, you might know that it may take, from your calculations or your knowledge on the steel industry, you might know that it may take, well, 5 years, 6 years, 7 years to set up the plant before you start doing the production, or before you start doing the production on 100% or commercial operation scale. And likewise, if you mobilize money for such an investment, you will need finance for for equally a longer term requirement. So if your steel industry, before it start generating profit, must have a setup time of 7 years and 3 years time before it start generating profit, that means you're talking of minimum 10 years of investment involved. And so you must look for finance, you must look for avenues of finance, you must look for the sources of finance which are available for long term purposes. So you say, well, maybe it could be long term debt, or it could be loan from financial institutions, or it could even be equity. But dividend, you may say, well, it's something that you can take every year, but it is really not so. Even if you take the decision on dividend every year, this dividend is a decision which is based on the profit that company is generating. And when you look at the current profit and assuming in a particular year the profit happens to be substantially higher than with respect to previous years, in that situation, let me also look at, yes, I think there are some questions. Uh, yes, screen I am presenting, but okay, maybe the screen is not visible, but it's the same screen that I have, same slide that I am showing. Oh, my screen actually, maybe it had gone off. Let me just, is it the case? Is my screen visible now?
Yes, sir, it is visible now.
Okay. Okay, I was on the same slide in between. Maybe I don't know. I had shown a slide. Yes, maybe it was. I don't know. Was that visible when I was talking of a slide on risk return trade off?
No, sir.
Uh, like this was the slide that I was talking about. I have not shown many slides so far, and basically I was moving between these two slides, and I had shown this slide for a while when I was talking of different securities in the context of risk return trade off. And I said there is a full spectrum of speculative equity shares to US Treasury bills. So that's how we are drawing a diagram of risk on the x axis and expected return on the y axis, is what I had shown. So coming back, I was dealing with major decisions in finance, and I said even dividend decision, though it is taken every year, sometimes it can be taken even for a frequency which is lower than a year. Like you have special dividends, like you have some interim dividend, right? So these are final dividend, interim dividend, special dividend. Sometimes you in a way give dividend in the form of bonus shares, right? So bonus share is nothing but a kind of benefit going to the shareholders, because you are dividing capital. When you are dividing capital, you are also giving an opportunity to, although in case of bonus shares, although capital as such is not getting divided, uh, capital gets divided when you do a split of shares. So when you do split of shares, bonus shares, special dividend, interim dividend, there is a overall profitability of the business you must keep in mind, overall expected growth in the business that you keep in mind. So there is a long term perspective when you're declaring this dividend. And those of you who follow what's happening in the market, you will find that a change in dividend is like change in the perspective of the profit of the business. So it is like you are sending a signal in the market that, well, this year we are issuing a special dividend. So the profitability of the business is improved, but we really do not know whether this will continue. So this is like a special dividend you have declared for this year, but you are not sure whether you will continue to do this in the future years. But instead of declaring a special dividend, let us say you have increased the dividend that you are giving away to the shareholders. As we know, I have mentioned also in the beginning, I am still not dealing with the topic. I'm just giving an introduction. So dividend is that portion of the profit that is distributed among the shareholders. So if you start giving extra dividend, now when you start giving extra dividend, one has to look at whether this extra dividend is coming due to extra profit or is coming out of the same profit. Supposing this extra dividend is coming from the same profit. Now, let me take an example at this stage. Let us say a company with a face value of 10 rupees share is compared to last year. Let's say last year dividend was 30%, and this year company has declared a 40% dividend. Now the profit has not increased and the dividend has increased. How will you interpret this kind of, what question comes to your mind when company gives extra dividend? Is company doing better? Is company doing worse? Yes, anybody? Yeah, who will take this call of my question? We are about to finish for today. Uh, can we continue for another 5-7 minutes? Yes. Okay. So since there is no reply coming, and what I am saying is that this extra dividend has to be understood. Let me not deliberate on this, because if I start deliberating into it, because my then we start going into dividend decision itself. So let me come back to the point that I was making, that these are three major decisions in finance. And when you say major, so when you say major decision in finance, this is the most important dimension that you keep in mind when you use the word finance. We are talking of all the three major decisions. So we say long term or major decision in finance, we are talking of investment, financing, and dividend. But when we are talking of financing, that means we are talking of one of the major decisions in finance. And likewise, then you have short term decisions, which are like working capital, because it's a set of decisions that you take with respect to working capital, because working capital has its manifestation in many different forms, in terms of creditors and debtors, in terms of cash and near cash, in terms of inventory, bills receivables. So there are many dimensions, and therefore each of these dimensions require a decisions depending upon the situation that you have with respect to that current asset. Okay, moving. So this is the slide that I had shown. So we will then, in the next classes, we'll just have a broader overview of how the economy is having the flow of funds. And then this is what I was talking about, the rating agencies. These are two internationally recognized rating agencies, Moody's and Standards and Poor. And you find, this is how they are rating the debt securities in the market. So AAA is the best. They're also rating even economies. So many times we hear about the rating of the economy. So these ratings are there for the we are talking of securities in this context right now. In the context of economy, we'll talk about it when the context comes. So that's how we will continue, and I think I should stop here because you might be having your other classes. If you have any questions, let me stop sharing the screen. And so if you have any questions, yes, you're welcome. We got 3-4 minutes. There is somebody who has joined just now. Yes, Vinamra Maheshwari. Vinamra or Vinamra? Company has earned good profit in particular year or quarter. Okay, I'm saying profit hasn't increased, but dividend has increased. So how will you interpret that? Because profit information is available before dividend information becomes available. If you look at the functionality of information reporting, we find quarterly results are reported, though these are unaudited results, and then there is a board meeting which happens. So in this board meeting, the decisions on dividends are taken. That's how the sequence of information flow is there in the market. So you already know that profitability is same and dividend has increased. So how will you interpret that? And likewise, Ritika is saying that company is doing better. Let me give you a counter view. And I'm not saying that my view is correct. I'm saying this could possibly be a a view. Kritika is saying maybe they have enough reserves. Yes, but meaning of having enough reserves, increasing profit, increasing dividend without having an increase in profit would mean that now they are giving away more resources to the shareholders instead of retaining. So if you are not retaining, it could possibly mean, and I'm taking, I'm speculating because we are not talking of any specific case. So one possibility is that their expected investment opportunities have actually become less, and they really do not know where to deploy their resources available. So they are better giving it away to shareholders. Or it could be that they are giving away better dividend, but they also want to further mobilize right issue, or they want to come up with a additional capital mobilization issue in the market, so that they are also. So it could be possible, but generally if you say profit is not increasing but dividend is increasing, so it implies that more resources are, instead of being retained, are given away to shareholders. So investment opportunities in the eyes of the management is actually declining. Because if investment opportunities are declining, and if you do not give away dividend, possibly the the returns on the stock, on the equity, would be declining. And because returns on the equity would be declining, in the sense that the price would not fetch as good value, because investment opportunities are declining, so profits are declining. So shareholders are expecting better opportunities coming somewhere else. So instead of, because you are not getting better dividend, you would say better me sell it off and invest somewhere else where more opportunities are there in the companies. So those companies may be giving. So there is a churning which happens. So this dividend is a very difficult ball game to interpret, and it is a decision which has long term implications. And it is this sense, though it is taken more frequently, it still is a long term decision. Gautam is saying in short term, if it can provide, it can prove to be beneficial for the reputation of the company's stock, as it is declaring a dividend at a higher rate. But on the long term, the investment opportunity for the company may decline. Yes, yes, yes. I am saying on the same lines. Look at a company, MRF. See the profit that they are earning and the dividend they are paying. The profit that they are earning per year, per share, goes. I think with this last example, I will stop here. Look at the example in terms of BSC data. Sorry, no, I've written BSS. BS. See, right now the MRF share is trading in the market for like yesterday's. It's a yesterday price at which it closed. Uh, Today's market is yet to open, and it says in terms of corporate action. Sorry, let me just share the screen. I think the screen is not there. Screen is not visible to you people. Just a second, because I had unshared the screen. Yes. Okay. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Right. So I was talking of this MRF share, which is like 10 rupees face value, and book value is you have to calculate, because price to book value ratio is given as 2.55. So if you divide your market price, which is 79,160, you divide it by 2.55, so you'll get the book value. So roughly I'm saying the book value is somewhere about, if I'm not wrong, somewhere about 30,000 plus. 30,000 plus rupees is the book value. Face value is just 10 rupees. And if you look at the dividend in terms of corporate action, so this is the dividend it has been consistently declaring. If you look at 2020, 3 rupees and 94. So these are the two. Interim is 3 rupees, final is 94 in both the years. We can look at the additional data by pressing this arrow, and you'll find the data on dividend for previous years also. But in 2021, in the month of August, just recent, they have declared an additional special dividend. I do not know how to interpret it right now. I've just given a broad general understanding. So they are not declaring very high dividend, but the market price of this share is very, very high. This is the only share which has got such a high level of price. Otherwise, most of the shares are below 40,000 rupees. Like there are some of the shares which are somewhere in the range of 30,000 also. There are again very few, 3-4 shares. And then you go back, you find, then there are few more companies which have got 20,000 rupees plus share price. And then there are other shares which are there. So this dividend is again a long-term decision, and is a complex decision to interpret its implication, is what I am saying at this moment. Okay, so if you don't have questions, if you have questions, you are welcome. If you don't have questions, you may just leave for your other classes, and we will have the next class most probably now on Thursday. I will tell you the schedule. Most probably it should be regular schedule, but if there is a change, I'll let you know. And in the next classes, we'll move on to discussing investment decision. This time value of money we will discuss along with investment decision.
Okay, sir.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.